The Fisherman Surf Workshop, brought to you by Penn and Spiderwire.
I really started getting more and more into wetsuiting about 10 years ago. I saw the advantages that it provided over wearing waders. I was able to gain access to rocks that I couldn't get to before when I was wearing waders. I could wade out obviously a lot deeper. There was no real limitations to where I could get to. I didn't have to worry about taking water over the top of my waders. If I was wading through a shallow boulder field, for example, with bubbleweed and everything wrapping around the legs, with the wetsuit, instead of falling down or always fighting to stay dry, if you start to go, you can just kind of sit down, take it easy, rest, stand back up. It's a much safer and easier way to wade through the shallows. Again, gaining access to some of the rocks that I couldn't even imagine getting to before when I was wearing the waders. You can swim out to rocks. With the wetsuit, it's not a problem. I can get out to these spots, and it really opened up the locations that I could fish. And fortunately with that comes more time on the water and better success in the long run. You're choosing your reel. You've got two options really to go with: a less expensive non-sealed reel. Great example of that would be the Penn 706Z. Spent many years in the surf. It's been a tried and true surf fishing reel. However, when you're wetsuiting, obviously the reel is going to spend a lot of time underwater, so you just got to make a couple of modifications to the reel to get it to stand up to the rigors of wetsuiting and spending all that time underwater. So the first one I do is I remove the side plate to pop 3 screws, take the side plate off, and pack it basically every inch inside of the body of the reel with some sort of marine grade grease or the Penn reel grease, any of that. Really get it into every single crevice that you possibly can. Load it all up. Then when you go to put the side plate back on, make sure you put a nice caked up seal around the edges where the screws go in, lock it down, and now the internals are completely protected by the grease from the salt water, which is eventually going to get in, but that protects the bearings and all the parts inside. Next up, you want to upgrade the drag. The top of the drag is sealed. There's a rubber gasket in there, so you stop some of the water intrusion. However, some water will still get in there, so what I do is I take that very same grease that goes into the body of the reel and I cake it on all of the drag washers all around the top and inside that seal on the bottom, so that basically, again, you're putting another coating of grease on everything so the water gets in there. The drag washers stay dry or greased. They don't get the water in there, which causes a jerky drag, so you get tip-top performance. Lastly, the roller bearing on the 706. A lot of guys complain it's noisy. Well, that's because when it comes standard, it's dry. What I'll do is I'll buy a brand new assembly, unassembled, of the roller, the bearing, all the parts, and again, pack that very same grease inside that bearing, reassemble it, put it on there, and it does two things. Again, it protects the bearing from corrosion from the salt water, and two, it silences it. So you have basically a waterproofed reel at a quarter of the cost of your high-end reels. You will still have to keep up a little bit of maintenance every couple of outings. Open up the side plate, check on everything, make sure no water's gotten in there. Perhaps you're going to have to add a little bit of grease. End of the season or partway through the season, assuming you're going to have to repack it, get some fresh grease in there just to make sure that everything stays in tip-top performance. So the other choice that you have is to go with a high-end reel that is designed to be waterproof from every inch, from the side plates to the drag. Basically everything that you were trying to accomplish by modifying a lower-end reel is already taken care of by Penn on the Penn Torque 5S that we're using today. There's seals all on the side plates, there's seals on the arm, the drag system, top and bottom has seals, so you don't have to worry about that saltwater intrusion. You can fish it underwater, you can swim with it just like we're doing today, and no worries about the drag slipping, getting jerky, any of the internals being damaged by the salt water. So again, that is the benefit of having the higher end reels that are produced with the intention of being waterproof, that you don't have to keep up that same maintenance. Basically you can just fish that reel, have its yearly service done as required, and after each trip, little fresh water, spray it down, put it away, and you're good to go for that next trip. So let me talk a little bit here about the line selection today. We've got, as you can see, braided line on this reel. This is 40-pound spider wire stealth. I generally use 40 and 50-pound when I'm in the surf. My smaller reels will get the 40. It's still gives you enough durability and not too thin that it's difficult to work with when your hands are wet or at night, but it's still strong enough that it's going to hold up for the most part for rocks and abrasion. 50-pound definitely holds up to pretty much everything you're going to run into. Some of the benefits of using braid in the surf. Right off the bat, you can use, it's smaller diameter. Obviously 50-pound braid compared to 50-pound monofilament, it's not even in the same game. 50-pound braid generally equates to 12-pound monofilament diameter. So what this gives you is greater casting distance. It's also in windy conditions, it's less likely to get caught by the wind, so that smaller diameter, it cuts through the wind so you can cast again better. You stay in better contact with the lure at all times. And the no stretch properties of the braid means you feel every single movement. From your lure to your bait to that strike from the striped bass, you feel everything. You bump bottom, you can tell the difference now a lot easier from the bottom to a hit as opposed to monofilament. So that is worlds above what you were finding with the monofilament. However, one of the drawbacks, or a couple of drawbacks I should say, from with using braid, that thin diameter will really, it's abrasive on your hands, for instance, for casting. So I'll just use standard gloves, work gloves that I've got. You can pick them up at a hardware store, just enough to sort of protect your fingers from that braid cutting in. The other thing, braid is not nearly as abrasion resistant as monofilament or fluorocarbon. So I'll go with a much longer leader. Generally, I outstretch my arms when I'm making my leader. I'm 6 feet tall, so roughly a 6-foot leader. This works in a couple of ways. One, when you're fishing in the rocks in the wetsuit, it gives you that durability, that cushion directly up to the fish, so if it does rub up against any rocks, it's going to hit your leader, which is more durable than the braid. When you're landing a fish, it gives you something a little bit thicker to grab onto. Again, instead of cutting into your hands with the braid, you can grab that monofilament. And as far as choices in line for the leader, I used fluorocarbon for years. Eventually I started to really think about it, and at night I can't see any real major benefit in the surf, or when I'm fishing, turbid waters, big surf, in the daytime, the conditions that I'm generally going to seek when I'm fishing in the daytime, I didn't see that there was really any major benefit to using fluorocarbon. So I started just using 50, 60, and 80-pound Berkley big game standard spool monofilament. Again, it's inexpensive, it's durable enough, and what I found is that I'm more willing to change out a slightly damaged leader with the less expensive monofilament, whereas when I was using fluorocarbon, which cost a little bit more, I always try to squeak those extra few casts and potentially brought the chance of losing a good fish just because I wanted to fish that damaged leader a little bit longer, just because in the first place it cost a little bit more. So again, a lengthy leader to protect from the rocks and abrasion, and again, the braid's going to give you that greater casting distance and sensitivity when you're fishing in the surf.